She thought she was just going for a quiet morning walk in the woods. But what Claire saw that day would shake everything she believed about the wild. A pregnant bobcat, wounded and in labor, locked eyes with her in desperation. And then, something happened. Something no biologist, no survivalist, no wildlife documentary could have prepared her for. In the next few minutes, Claire would face a choice that could cost her life, or change it forever. What the bobcat did next defied every rule of nature. Stay with us, because this isn't just a rescue story. It's a moment that rewrote the wild's code. The pines and the wild eyes. Claire Bennett adjusted the worn strap of her canvas pack and stepped out onto the dew-covered porch of her cabin. Nestled deep in Oregon's Wallowa Mountains, the structure was little more than a square of timber and tin, functional, remote, and exactly what she needed. At 29, Claire looked older than her age in quiet, weathered ways. The sun had tanned her skin to a soft bronze, and weeks without makeup or mirrors had let her natural freckles return. Her chestnut hair was always tied in a simple ponytail, often flecked with bits of pine from the forest trails she walked daily. She wasn't hiding from the world, at least that's what she told herself. But deep down, she knew the truth. After years of field research, professional burnout, and the loss of her mother, she'd stopped wanting to explain herself to people who couldn't feel what she felt when she looked at the trees. Claire had once been a promising wildlife ecologist, degrees from UC Davis, internships in Yellowstone, grant proposals that made headlines. But the deeper she got into the bureaucracy of conservation, the less she recognized herself. Endless paperwork, conflicts over funding, animal tags and data sheets. It felt like every step forward required sacrificing a piece of what made her love the wild in the first place. So she walked away, sold everything that didn't fit in the back of her old Subaru, and headed north until pavement gave way to gravel. The cabin had come cheap, a ranger's post-retirement project that never finished. No electricity, a wood stove for heat, rain barrels for water, and a satellite radio she rarely turned on. Mornings were sacred here. Claire would rise at dawn, drink bitter coffee boiled over fire, and sit on the back steps with her journal. She'd sketch tracks she spotted the day before, jot down changes in the forest canopy, or simply stare into the pine-cloaked hills in silence. Wildlife had grown used to her presence, or perhaps they simply didn't see her as a threat. That morning, the sky was a soft blue brushed with pink clouds. Birds darted from tree to tree, and a squirrel scolded her from a nearby branch as she scribbled in her notebook. Everything was calm, steady, until she heard it. A low, rasping growl from the thicket beyond the ridge trail. Claire froze. Her hand hovered over her pen. It wasn't the sound of aggression. It was pain, desperate, raw, and very close. She stood slowly, the muscles in her legs tightening with alert tension. Whatever was out there wasn't small, and it was suffering. Her heart began to beat faster. Years of training told her not to interfere. But something deeper, something more human, told her she couldn't just walk away. She slipped her journal into her pack, grabbed her binoculars, and headed into the trees. Something was waiting, and it wasn't just another animal. The ground sloped gently downward as Claire picked her way through the underbrush, careful not to snap twigs or rustle branches. Years in the field had taught her how to move silently, how to become invisible when it counted. Her boots sank slightly into the soft earth as she crouched behind a boulder and raised her binoculars toward the thicket ahead. There, just beyond the cluster of fallen pines, under the shade of a cedar, lay the source of the growl. A bobcat. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Not just any bobcat. A full-grown female, roughly twice the size of a domestic cat, with powerful limbs and that unmistakable short bobtail. Her coat was a mottled mix of tawny gray and faint black spots, blending almost perfectly into the woodland floor. But it was the cat's posture that made Claire's heart pound. She was lying on her side, her body curled protectively inward, panting heavily. Her fur was matted with sweat and dirt, and her left hind leg jutted at an unnatural angle. Blood darkened the fur around a raw, open wound, likely from a steel jaw trap, Claire guessed, with a sickening lurch in her gut. The bobcat's ribs heaved with every breath. Her yellow eyes, narrowed in pain, flicked upward to meet Claire's. Claire didn't move. For a few suspended seconds, the two locked eyes, woman and wildcat, predator and scientist. But what Claire saw in those eyes wasn't threat or rage. It was desperation. A tremor passed through the bobcat's body, and she let out a guttural cry. Her stomach convulsed. Claire's field experience kicked in with the force of instinct. She's in labor. Her mind raced. An injured bobcat giving birth alone in the wild stood little chance. Between blood loss, infection, and predators drawn by the scent, she and her cubs wouldn't survive the night. Claire swallowed hard. Everything in her training told her to keep her distance. Document from afar. Let nature take its course. But nature hadn't set this up. A human-made trap had, and now nature was bleeding for it. Slowly, carefully, Claire backed away from the rock and made a wide circle toward her cabin. She moved in a crouch, avoiding open spaces, heart thudding in her chest. She didn't run. She didn't make a sound. Back at the cabin, she grabbed her field med kit, gloves, antiseptic spray, bandages, a tiny bottle of diluted tranquilizer. Her breath was shallow. She wasn't a vet. She'd done field aid on deer, tagged elk, helped tranquilize wolves. But never this. Never a bobcat. Never one about to give birth. Still, as she headed back toward the cedar grove, one thought echoed louder than all the fear. She can't do this alone. And if Claire didn't help, no one would. The risk of trust. Claire returned to the grove as the sun crept higher into the sky, casting golden streaks through the pine canopy. The forest was still, the kind of quiet that carries weight. She moved low and slow, approaching from a different angle than before. She didn't want to startle the bobcat, or worse, be perceived as a threat. Every step was measured, every sound intentional. From behind a tangle of ferns, she saw the bobcat again. The wild cat hadn't moved much since her first approach. Her breathing was heavier now, and her body trembled with the effort of resisting pain. The injured leg was still awkwardly extended, the wound dark and angry. Flies had begun to gather at the edges. Claire's pulse quickened. If she didn't act soon, the injury alone could turn septic, let alone the risk from labor complications. But this wasn't some domestic animal used to human touch. This was a wild predator, defensive and hormonal, on the brink of exhaustion. And yet, those yellow eyes met hers again, not wide with fear or fury, but narrow, wary, almost resigned. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out the tranquilizer, a light sedative, just enough to dull the sharpest edge of pain. It wasn't meant for bobcats, but she calculated the dosage based on weight, erring on the side of caution. She loaded the small syringe and waited for the right moment. She didn't need to get close enough for an injection. A tranquilizer dart would be safer, but she had none. This had to be manual. Risky, yes, but possible. Claire moved a little closer, stepping slowly into the open, her hands visible, her movements calm and deliberate. She kept her voice low and steady as she spoke, more to herself than the animal. "I'm not here to hurt you," she murmured. "I know you're scared, but I need you to trust me, just for a little while." The bobcat growled, a soft, rumbling sound from deep in her chest, but she didn't lunge. Claire crouched 5 feet away and sat still for several minutes, letting the tension bleed out of the air. She took a bottle of water, poured a small amount on a cloth, and gently tossed it toward the bobcat. Not at her, but nearby. A peace offering. The bobcat sniffed, but didn't react. Claire waited longer, observing the timing between contractions, watching the tail twitch each time pain surged through the cat's body. Finally, when the animal's head dipped low with a shudder, Claire moved. Quick, quiet, focused. She slid close enough to touch the hind leg, applied the antiseptic in a firm, controlled spray, and carefully injected the tranquilizer into the flesh, just above the wound. The bobcat jerked, letting out a strangled snarl, and Claire pulled back instantly, hands up, heart pounding. But the cat didn't attack. She stared, breathing hard, then slumped slightly onto her side as the sedative began to take hold. Claire exhaled in disbelief. Her hands trembled, but she didn't stop. She moved in again, this time to inspect the injury more thoroughly. It was a deep puncture, likely caused by a metal trap, now long gone. Claire cleaned it with quick, practice movements, applied antibiotic ointment, and wrapped it as gently as possible. As she worked, the forest around her seemed to hold its breath. She was now sitting inches away from a wild bobcat in labor, treating a wound, speaking in a soft whisper, unsure of what would happen next. But one thing was certain. The line between fear and trust had been crossed. The sedative began to wear off slowly, just enough to dull the edges of the bobcat's agony without putting her or the cubs in danger. Claire backed away a few feet, kneeling in the dirt with her medical bag half open beside her, ready for whatever might come next. She didn't know if the cat would lash out when she fully came to, or if her instincts would override the brief window of trust they'd found. But there was no time to wonder. The first contraction hit like a wave. The bobcat's body arched, her claws digging into the pine needles, eyes wide and feral as her muscles fought to bring new life into the world. Claire stayed still, alert, breath tight in her chest, but not moving. Within minutes, the first cub emerged. A male slick with birth fluid, his fur already showing hints of the signature rosette spots. Claire watched in awe as the mother turned her head and licked the tiny body with steady, purposeful strokes. The cub coughed weakly and let out a tiny squeal, then began to squirm. Claire felt a rush of warmth in her chest. The little one was strong. The mother curled her body slightly, creating a small pocket of warmth beside her belly. She gently nudged the first cub there and returned her attention to the next wave of pain rolling through her. Claire had seen videos of wild births before, had even witnessed a moose calving once in Montana, but this was different, closer, intimate, raw. The second cub came faster, a smaller female but equally lively. She slid out with a wet rush and immediately squirmed under her mother's tongue as the bobcat cleaned her with the same fierce focus. Claire smiled faintly. So far, so good. She dared to hope. Then everything changed. The third labor didn't come quickly. The mother panted heavily, her breathing shallow and uneven. Her body trembled more violently now, and her muscles spasmed without progress. Claire's optimism began to fray. Something was wrong. Minutes passed. Claire counted the breaths, watched the mother's side rise and fall too fast, too shallow. She whispered under her breath, "Come on, girl. Just one more. You can do this." Then, finally, the third cub appeared. It was smaller, paler. Its spots were barely visible and it didn't move. Not even a twitch. The mother turned her head slowly. She didn't lick this one, not right away. Instead, she stared at it. Her breath rattled. Her eyes looked different now, dark, distant, like they were searching for an answer she couldn't find. Claire's heart sank. The cub wasn't breathing. In the wild, this is where the story usually ends. Weak ones don't make it. Nature decides quickly and without pity. Claire knew the rules, but the silence in the grove was unbearable. Then something incredible happened. The mother bobcat shifted. Her leg trembling, she reached out and gave the motionless cub a gentle nudge. Then another. Then a third, firmer push toward Claire. Claire blinked, stunned. It wasn't accidental. The movement was deliberate, focused. The bobcat had turned the cub toward her, inching it closer with surprising precision. "She's asking for help." Claire didn't hesitate. She crawled forward, scooping the lifeless cub into her hands. It was ice cold, limp. She wiped away fluid from its mouth and nose with a clean cloth, then held it against her chest, wrapping it in her flannel shirt and pressing her body heat into it. She could feel her own heartbeat hammering as she whispered softly, "Come on, little one, stay with me." Still nothing. Then a twitch. So small it might have been imagined, but Claire saw it. The cub's mouth moved. A weak, wheezing gasp. Its paws curled slightly against her fingers. Claire closed her eyes, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Behind her, the mother bobcat watched silently. She didn't growl, didn't move, just stared at Claire with an expression Claire didn't know how to name. Not fear, not threat. Something else. Recognition. And maybe hope. Claire stayed crouched on the forest floor, the tiny, barely alive cub pressed to her chest. The flannel fabric of her shirt was damp from birth fluid and her own sweat, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was warmth. Life-saving warmth. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted the cloth to better cover the cub's fragile body. It was still breathing, barely. A rasping, shallow sound. But it was there. She rocked slightly, not even realizing it, instinctively swaying the way she imagined a mother might. Her own breath slowed, sinking with the soft rise and fall of the cub's tiny chest. With one hand, she rubbed its back in small, circular motions, stimulating blood flow the way she'd seen done in emergency wildlife rescues. Her body heat seemed to help. After a minute or two, the cub whimpered. A faint, pathetic sound. But a sound nonetheless. She looked up. The mother bobcat was still watching, just a few feet away, exhausted but alert. Her two healthy cubs squirmed at her side, making small squeaks as they nestled against her fur. She licked them occasionally, but never took her eyes off Claire and the third cub. It struck Claire all at once. The sheer improbability of what was happening. A wild bobcat, one of North America's most elusive and aggressive predators, had not only tolerated her presence but entrusted her with its weakest offspring. It wasn't just extraordinary. It was unheard of, Claire whispered, her voice soft, reverent. "I don't know why you trust me, but I won't let you down." Minutes passed in silence, the only sounds being the soft rustle of wind through pine branches and the breathing of the four beings who shared that small patch of forest. 3 feline, 1 human. Claire adjusted the blanket again, noting the cub's body temperature rising slowly. It moved a little more now, its limbs less stiff, its mouth opening in short gasps. It needed to return to its mother soon. It needed milk, warmth, and the wild instincts that Claire couldn't give. But rushing the moment could undo everything. She had to wait for a signal, not from herself, but from the mother. She didn't wait long. The bobcat shifted, pulling herself up slightly on her front paws, a low growl rumbling from her throat. Not angry, not aggressive, but assertive. Her eyes moved from Claire to the cub in her arms. Claire nodded slowly. "Okay," she said aloud. "Okay, let's try." She lowered the bundle gently onto a soft bed of moss between them, keeping one hand under the cub's head as she pulled the flannel back. The cub let out a sharp, higher-pitched cry, weak but clear. That was enough. The mother moved. Her gait was uneven, the bandaged leg still raw beneath the wrapping. But she moved with purpose. One step, then another. She stopped just a foot from the cub, then looked at Claire. Really looked at her. For a moment, time stopped. In those eyes, Claire saw intelligence, not just instinct. A message that didn't need words. Then, the bobcat reached down and gently took the cub by the scruff of its neck. She didn't carry it away. Not yet. She turned back toward Claire once more, eyes catching the fading light filtering through the trees. In that glance, Claire felt something shift inside her, a soft unraveling of the wall she had built around her heart for years. It wasn't just the wild that trusted her, it was life itself, raw and pure. The mother bobcat returned to her makeshift den, curling around all 3 cubs. Claire stepped back, giving her space, every sense on high alert, yet somehow at peace. She knew not to linger. As the last rays of afternoon sun lit up the edge of the forest in warm gold, Claire took one last look. 3 cubs, 1 mother, and a moment that would never happen again. She turned and walked away, quietly, slowly, leaving behind more than just footprints. She left behind the boundary that once divided her world from theirs, the bond beyond survival. The grove stood empty the next morning. Claire returned just after sunrise, her breath fogging in the crisp mountain air. She stepped over the familiar roots and ducked beneath the cedar branches where, less than a day ago, she had watched a miracle unfold. Now, the forest had reclaimed its quiet. No flattened grass, no paw prints, no lingering scent. The bobcat and her cubs were gone. Claire stood still for a long time, scanning the underbrush with her binoculars, heart half hopeful, half afraid. But there was nothing, no movement, no sound. It was as if the family had never been there at all. She knelt where the birth had taken place, her fingers brushing against the pine needles. The earth was undisturbed. Nature had erased the evidence, as it always did. And yet, in her chest, Claire felt something had been left behind. Not a trace, but an impression, like a dream so vivid it lingers long after waking. She whispered into the stillness, "I hope you're safe out there." The days that followed were quieter than usual. Claire kept her routine, journaling, foraging, walking the perimeter trails. But her mind kept drifting back to the bobcat. She wondered if the injury was healing, if the cubs were strong enough to survive. She thought most about the smallest one, the pale-furred runt who'd nearly died in her arms. Part of her wanted to believe she'd earned something from that encounter, a connection, a bond. But the truth was simpler and far more humbling. She had been granted a moment, nothing more, and nothing less. One afternoon, about a week later, Claire sat by the woodpile, sharpening her hatchet when she noticed the silence again. Not the ordinary hush of the forest, but that particular stillness that hangs just before something stirs. She stood, scanning the tree line. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw movement, just the faintest flash of tawny fur weaving between the pines. A shape, a shadow, gone as quickly as it appeared. Claire held her breath. She didn't call out, didn't move. Because sometimes, silence is all you get, and sometimes it's enough. She returned to her cabin that evening with a different kind of peace in her chest. Not the comfort of knowing, but the grace of having witnessed something rare. The wild had let her in, not fully, not forever, but enough to remind her why she had come here in the first place. Not to escape the world, but to feel part of something greater than herself. In the absence of the bobcat, Claire found presence, and though the clearing now lay empty, she knew it would never be just another patch of forest again. It had become sacred, because once, on that quiet ground beneath the trees, something wild had reached across the line, and trusted her to reach back. It was dusk again, Claire's favorite hour. The light stretched long and golden across the tops of the pines, casting deep purple shadows that draped like velvet over the undergrowth. She sat on her porch with a tin mug of strong tea, the steam rising lazily into the mountain air. A journal lay open beside her, filled with sketches and scribbled notes from her last hike. She hadn't seen the bobcat in over 2 weeks. Claire told herself she was fine with that. She told herself it was enough to know they'd survived, that the mother had moved on, that the forest had done what it always does. She had been a chapter in their story, nothing more. But then, just as the sun kissed the ridge, A flicker of movement caught her eye. At the edge of the tree line, not 50 feet from the cabin, stood the bobcat. Claire froze, the mug forgotten in her hand. The wild cat looked different, healthier. Her fur was fuller now, clean and shining in the last light of day. Her wounded leg no longer dragged. She stood tall and steady. But it wasn't just the mother standing there. 3 cubs clung to her side. Claire's breath caught in her throat. The 2 larger cubs tumbled over each other playfully, swatting and pouncing, their balance clumsy and adorable. But the third, the smallest one, the pale furred runt, stood slightly apart, blinking toward the cabin. Its coat was still lighter than the others, spots more faded, but its body was stronger now, more confident, and its golden eyes, they looked straight into Claire's. They stared at each other for several seconds, human and cat, across the boundary of wood and wild. The bobcat didn't move forward. She didn't need to. Her message was clear. We're still here, we survived, and we remember. Claire didn't rise. She didn't speak. She simply smiled, slow and wide. The kind of smile that comes from somewhere deep, where sorrow used to live. The Wild family lingered for only a moment longer. Then, as silently as they had appeared, the bobcat turned. With one last glance over her shoulder, she slipped into the trees, her cubs following close behind. Claire remained on the porch until the last streak of sunlight vanished behind the mountains. The forest reclaimed its quiet, but something had changed. She felt it, not in the air, not in the trees, in herself. Later, she flipped to a fresh page in her journal and wrote a single sentence. They came back, not because they had to, but because they chose to. And for the first time in a long while, Claire didn't feel like a woman retreating from the world. She felt seen, acknowledged, part of something ancient and alive. The Wild hadn't just accepted her, it had remembered her. Legacy in the pines. Claire wasn't sure why she brought the camera that day. It had gathered dust for weeks on the cabin shelf, wedged between her field binoculars and an old trail guide. She had always preferred her sketchbook, more personal, more present. But something compelled her to sling the strap over her shoulder before heading out. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was hope. The air was cool and clean as she walked the familiar path beyond the cedar grove. Her boots made soft impressions in the moss, and the scent of juniper and pine filled her lungs. She hadn't gone far when she saw it. Just ahead, in the shaded brush near a fallen log. Tracks. Not fresh, but not old either. 4 sets, small paw prints, staggered beside larger ones, cub-sized, and unmistakably bobcat. Her heart began to race. She dropped to one knee, tracing a print with her finger, feeling the crisp edges where claws had dug into the soil. She followed them a few steps forward, her eyes scanning for movement. But the woods were still. Then she noticed it, something glinting near the base of the log. She leaned closer and gasped. It was a bone fragment, small, clean, and next to it, an untouched flower, wild lupine, recently placed. The juxtaposition was striking. Claire couldn't explain how or why, but it felt deliberate, like a mark. Not left by nature, but by something aware. She lifted her camera, not for the print, not for the flower, but for the space. She focused through the lens, framing the empty path between the trees where shadow and sunlight played. She clicked once, then again, capturing silence, capturing memory. When she returned home and uploaded the photos to her solar-charged laptop, her breath caught. In the third frame, barely noticeable at first, was a pale blur just behind the brush, the hint of a shape. 2 golden eyes, mid-blink, staring directly at the lens. The smallest cub. Claire leaned back, hand over her mouth. It wasn't a great photo by technical standards, blurry, obscured, but it was real. A moment caught by chance or perhaps by invitation. That night, she printed the photo and pinned it above her desk. It joined a collection of sketches and notes, but this one was different. This one didn't need words. The forest hadn't just returned her trust. It had given her something tangible, a signal that what she'd experienced wasn't imagination or projection. It was real. It had happened, and now she had the proof. As she sat in the soft glow of her lantern, staring at the eyes frozen in the frame, Claire whispered something to the quiet. "Thank you," for the wild had offered her the rarest gift of all, a witness to her story. The seasons in the Wallowa Mountains shifted slowly, like breath. Summer gave way to crisp autumn winds, and the once dense green canopy turned to gold and ember. Claire marked each change with steady notes in her journal: temperatures, migration signs, the first frost on the water barrel. But her thoughts always drifted back to the bobcats. Their visits became less frequent, more subtle. A paw print near the woodpile, a faint rustle outside the window just before dawn. Once, she found a half-eaten rabbit carcass left cleanly on a rock by the creek. Not the chaotic scatter of a kill, but something almost ceremonial. She never saw them clearly again. Not like before, but she didn't need to. The presence was enough. The cabin began to transform. Where once its bare walls and shelves had echoed her isolation, now they told stories. Claire framed her blurred photo of the third cub and placed it beside a collection of feathers, leaves, and stones gathered during her walks. Her journal entries became longer, richer, more open. One entry read, "I came here to escape noise. I found a deeper language in silence." She began submitting articles again, not to the dense, jargon-heavy academic journals that had once buried her spirit, but to outreach programs, youth wildlife foundations, and local newsletters. She told the story of the bobcat, not as a scientific anomaly, but as a lesson in trust, in empathy, in quiet attention. The responses surprised her. Letters came in from students, hikers, even retired rangers, people who had once brushed against the wild and never forgotten it. They didn't ask for proof. They shared their own stories. A fox that lingered a moment too long, a hawk that returned every year, a deer that looked back. Claire realized something then. The real legacy of what she had experienced wasn't the photo or the memory of a single moment under a cedar tree. It was what came after, the ripples, because something had shifted, not just in her, but in how she chose to engage with the world. She was no longer hiding from it. She was sharing it. Her cabin became a stop for local wildlife interns, a place for quiet talks around a fire, for passing on what can't be found in textbooks. How to listen, how to wait, how to recognize when the wild offers you a moment, and how not to miss it. One night, as the first snow dusted the windowsill, Claire sat by the fire with her notebook open and a fresh page waiting. She didn't know what the bobcat family was doing now, whether they had moved deeper into the range or stayed nearby. But she knew one thing for certain. They had changed her. Not with noise, not with grandeur, but with trust. And in that trust, Claire had found her voice again. In the quiet corners of the world, there are stories that don't roar. They whisper. Claire's journey with the bobcat family reminds us of something deeply human. That empathy knows no species, and that trust, once given, is a sacred bridge between worlds. We often believe that courage comes in loud declarations or bold moves. But sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is kneel in the dirt, stay still, and choose to care when it would be easier to walk away. At Paw Prints and Stories, we share these rare emotional tales because they carry more than just heart. They carry reminders of who we are at our best. So here's a challenge. In your life, whether with people or with the world around you, will you wait long enough to earn trust that's not owed and give compassion that's not expected? Because one moment of true connection, like Claire and that fragile cub, can change everything.